Welcome back. People out there, you probably know somebody, you have a kid or a parent who is not where they want to be financially, and getting off the ground or getting to that next step where you feel some level of financial freedom is not only a big political thing that people are talking about, but it does hit home, and you have to be able to make those right choices for yourself. As we just went through this, the opportunity, I guess, that presents itself of bankruptcy to, wipe yourself clean of some of the debts. The next step oftentimes that people are worried about is getting into that next house. If you're not going to live in the home you live in, you're going to have to make find a different place to live. Lynn Calimlim joins us, a property manager and managing broker with North Pacific Properties. Welcome, Lynn.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So, we brought up Nordstrom's and earlier, and you got pretty excited about Nordstrom's.
I did. I gave you the thumbs up. I worked there for a very long time before I was in real estate. 16 and a half years.
Nice. And yeah. It's a great place to go hone those customer service skills and be able to, work with people.
Absolutely. I went to the University of Nordstrom, that's for sure.
So when people are, when people look for a real estate agent, oftentimes it's different when you're thinking buy a house, rent a house. Talk a little bit about, how North Pacific Properties really manages both those sides of the business.
Yeah, we are absolutely a full-service real estate company. Our approach is a lot of times we take on an owner who comes to us pretty educated about the market. They've had their property on the market, or they've had a CMA done by another agent, and they know the value, and they're not very happy about the value. A lot of times situations have forced them to relocate out of the country or out of the state, or just not live in their home anymore. And they come to us because they want us to help stop the bleeding by renting it for, close to what their mortgage payment is, and sometimes exactly what their mortgage payment is. If in a really good situation, I can get over and above what their mortgage payment is. And we do all the credit, criminal screening to place a good tenant in the home. And then we hope that, throughout the course of us renting that property for them, we earn their trust enough that when they want to list the house to sell it and our market does come back, that they choose us as their real estate company. And in some situations, the tenant chooses us to represent them in buying a home, because a lot of people, are coming to us after a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a short sale, and it's their place to kind of get square again. And ultimately, they want to buy a home again.
This is a place they're going to call home. It's not just buy a home. This is a place they can maybe go plan on living in for a while.
Yes, absolutely. We hope to keep them happy so they stay for a long time.
I want to go back to something that you had just said, though, about how people, a lot of these people, you're trying to cover their mortgage. A lot of the people who you're helping rent their house out, this is not necessarily their business. They're not thinking, I want to be a landlord and own rental properties.
Yeah, we do represent some people that, are investment clients and they own, 8+ units. But most people come to us and are not landlords by choice. They're being a landlord or renting their property out because they cannot sell it. Obviously, some of them, if they're moving out of the country, ideally, if they could put it on the market and get what it's worth, they would do that. But they come to us educated and know they can't do that. So it's not by choice, and we're really just helping maintain the value of their property so that when they are able to sell it, it's still in good shape, and we can hopefully list it for them and turn around and sell it and be in a better situation all the way around.
Do people, when you're talking to them, what are some of those big questions you get as far as, hey, how are you going to take care of my house? Because as you just said, they probably do want to sell it, or many of the people do want to sell it. Maybe it's in 3 years or 5 years. What are some of the things that you do to make sure that this is kind of a hands-off experience for the home owner or investment owner, and to make sure that investment is going to, be maintained or continue to grow, hopefully?
I think one of the biggest things is just North Pacific's approach to property management. A lot of property management companies have managers who manage 180, 190 units, and I actually did that for another company. And it's not a manageable amount of workload for one property manager. I manage close to 80. It's manageable for me to actually visit my properties, at least once a month, drive by, do property inspections every 6 months. And in some cases, if we get a neighbor complaint, we can go give a 24-hour notice and go out immediately to inspect it. I think sometimes when your portfolio is too big, and I think we're very smart about that, we keep it manageable. You can't physically get to the property to maintain it the way it needs to be. And so we do those things to make sure that we're following up. And we deal with a lot of homeowner association too. The lawn's not cut, and we have to send a love note about the lawn not being clean and mowed. And so we do those things for the owner when they cannot physically drive by.
And that then allows it to be a little bit more of a hands-off experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost in property management, no news is good news because, we're keeping the tenant happy, we're maintaining the property, we're collecting your rent, and we're directly depositing into your account. So it's a completely seamless transition for the owner. And really the person they deal with is me. I get to call them and say, hey, the toilet's leaking. And I'm going to send somebody out to fix it.
We said before we came on, it's always the toilet leaking. I don't know what it is, but it's always the toilet leaking.
Yes. And so they deal with me. And a lot of times I can play that, for lack of a better word, bad cop and say, no, we're not going to do some of these cosmetic things. You rented the home the way it is. We're really just maintaining the things that, you need to have maintained in a home and not necessarily remodeling homes.
And so what are some of those things if you are renting? What are some things that people should expect to be taken care of? And what are things that maybe they shouldn't? Because I would think that's kind of a gray area.
Well, it is a little gray.
Other than leaky toilets, of course.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think the quality of tenant that we get now is a little bit different because in some situations they're coming to us already owning a home. And so a lot of times they'll maintain things that somebody else who's never owned a home would not do. I think we do front and back lawns. Lawn maintenance is definitely something that's included in our lease that's taken care of. And other than that, I mean, besides keeping your house clean and living clean, anything else I would want to know about so that we can maintain it and make sure that it's a licensed bonded contractor who's doing those repairs.
So there's kind of this element of that it sounds like you guys not only will manage the tenant, but you're going to make sure that the property is going to be maintained, also making it, I guess, easy for the tenant to live there.
Absolutely. I mean, my tenants, I hope when they turn around and want to buy a home that they choose me as their real estate agent or North Pacific as their company. And, it's kind of...
Although you probably won't be mowing their lawn at that point.
No, I'm not going to mow their lawn. But it's a way for them to kind of have a trial run with us as a real estate company because, my tenants have my cell phone number. A lot of property managers don't give that out. If they have a problem, my phone is the one that rings in the middle of the night, if something needs to be taken care of. And so they're getting that firsthand service from me. They know exactly how I'm going to respond to them when they're in a real estate transaction, too. So it's almost like I'm coming with a resume already and hoping that, we earn their respect and trust to choose us as a real estate company later on when they go to buy or sell a home.
It's pretty forward thinking in that, you're working with people who eventually want to buy a home because buying a home is still something that people want to do. People maybe don't want to do it right now, but people still want to do that. And it's pretty forward thinking to actually take, from a business standpoint, work with these clients and gain their trust, which is actually good for the clients too, because they have somebody they know that will know them. They'll know maybe their lifestyle, their kids, their pets, and then help them more effectively find a home when the time comes.
And in an ideal situation, we may have the tenant buy the home they're in. The owner wants to sell it. We get to a better place in the market, and the tenant loves the home so much they want to stay. And I've had tenants question me about that before. Would the owner want to sell it to us? And we've, done some numbers and things like that. And maybe it's not quite there yet, but in an ideal situation, the tenant may buy the home that we're renting to them.
How's that process work? I mean, if somebody wants to, they just ask you, and then you work with them.
Yeah, we would work with the buyer and the seller to facilitate the transaction, and it actually would, save some money because we're helping them. We've already found the buyer for the owner.
And you already have the seller.
And we already have the seller, and we know more about the property than just about anybody because we've been maintaining it and managing it for 4 years. And I know everything that's gone wrong with it, unfortunately, sometimes. And, I would be the person who'd be the expert on the property because it's been my property for 4 years.
Do you see that as something that will be a growing industry in the future where people who are done renting will want to go buy? And do you see that as connecting those renters to the actual property is something that more people are going to do? Or do you think are people renting up from their old house or are they renting down? And is that new place they're living in, is that going to, exceed their goals or their dreams of a home they would want to purchase?
I think in some situations people are able to rent up because there's a lot, more properties on the market that normally would not have been for rent. They would have sold, especially the higher end properties. We have some rents that are up in the $2,400 monthly rates. And those are big, beautiful 4,000 square foot homes in, Mill Creek in my area. And, people can rent those because they're available, where before they weren't available. You would have just sold that house. You wouldn't have rented it. It's not an ideal rental to have a 4,000 square foot, built in 2007 beautiful home as a rental property. It is a rental property now. And I think, a lot of people are moving into properties they normally would not have been able to move into. And they're nicer than the home they're leaving.
Does the rental market on some of these houses, does that trend with the apartments and all these other places that are going up? I mean,
Yeah.
do you and then if you have these people who are already there, do you tend to boot them or raise their rents, or how does that typically work?
No, I mean, we don't want to boot people. I mean, ideally, if we get a great tenant who loves the property and is taking great care of them, we want to keep that tenant in the property because, raising a rent $150, $200 a month and having to replace a new tenant is not a good business for anybody. Costs the owner money, costs us money. And a lot of times, we want to keep that person happy. So we try and keep our rental increases reasonable, but also a good decision for the owner. A lot of times the owner is making taking a little bit less than he would like to take monthly. And, if we can get $50 or $100 more and the market's starting to increase, that's what we do. So come renewal time, we start to kind of look at our property values and look at what things are rented for and look at just even what we've got as a company and raise it when we can. But we want it to be reasonable because, if we have to place a brand new tenant, it's expensive
right.
for the owner.
Well, it's kind of expensive, I think, it's also expensive for a renter. I mean, you think about it on that side, but if you're just going to move as a renter, I tend to think that a lot of people maybe don't take that time to go, well, the moving van, if they want one, is going to be $500, and that there's an expense to moving that I don't know is always figured in. Do you see it being figured in by renters?
I think a little bit, yeah. I mean, I don't think sometimes, even when you say we're going to raise the rent $50, it kind of puts people off a little bit. But I think if it's a communication process between myself and the tenant, they understand, In a lot of cases, they knew when they took the property a year or 2 years ago that they got a great deal. So they're expecting it. And a lot of times they ask the question when they've rented it, is this going to go up? And I say, it might, $50 to $100. I'm not sure. It'll depend on where we're at, but we'll talk about that. And we try and give them enough notice that it's an open thing. It's not like we just want to send them a bill and say, hey, your rent's going to go up $100. It's a communication process we go through. We want to keep everybody happy.
Lynn, we just have a couple minutes left before we have to go to break. Again, we're here with Lynn Calimlim of North Pacific Properties. Talk a little bit more about what a renter needs to go through, because as we just talked with Grant about bankruptcy and credit, how have those credit requirements changed on rentals?
I think there's a misconception that we go off just credit scores. Obviously, in an ideal situation, we would love to have people with ideal credit scores, but then they wouldn't be a renter, they'd be buying a house. So especially in this market, with interest rates and all the great deals you can get out there, they wouldn't probably be one of my tenants. We try to overlook some of those things and look at the whole picture. In most situations, you can look at somebody's history and know that their house is what caused them to be in a financial situation that they would have a lower credit score. Obviously, if there's a lot of criminal activity and things like that, it's a pretty much no-brainer for us that no, we do not want to rent to you. But, it's a better quality tenant for me if they've already owned a home. And in this economy, we're finding more often than not, a good majority of my portfolio is people who have lost their home and they're fabulous tenants.
Especially if you're renting 4,000 square foot homes. I mean, that isn't exactly your typical fresh out of college house people want to go live in is 4,000 square feet in Mill Creek.
No, not typically, not at all. And in those rental rates, $2,300, $2,400, we ask for income verification, and we know that the person can afford it. It kind of weeds out the riffraff in those rental rates.
Yeah, I could imagine. Lynn, thanks so much for joining us. It's Lynn Calimlim with North Pacific Properties. When we come back, whether you're renting or buying, living within your means is certainly something you have to do. We're going to bring everybody back, including Heather, who is going to join us. My name is Ben Brashen. You're listening to Brashenomics.